Imagine a perfect, sun-drenched slice of 1984 Sherman Oaks, California. It's early evening, and you have, kids coasting down the middle of a quiet cul-de-sac on faded blue banana seat bikes.
Oh, complete with the little plastic streamers snapping in the breeze, I'm sure.
Yes, exactly. And someone's dad is washing a Camaro in the driveway, the smell of soapy water hitting hot asphalt. You know the vibe.
Very nostalgic.
Right. There's a boombox sitting on the hood of a parked Buick playing Van Halen through these fuzzy, battery-starved speakers. It is the absolute picture of a mundane suburban summer.
But there is a catch.
A huge catch.
Yeah.
Because then you pan the camera back, way, way back, and you realize this totally normal neighborhood is stranded in the middle of a barren, uncharted alien world.
Which is just a wild visual.
It really is. The sky above is not the smoggy Los Angeles horizon. It's this wrong, star-filled void. The sunset is completely frozen, just hanging in the sky like an oil painting. Oh, and right above the atmosphere, ancient Klingon and Romulan warships are locked in a vicious, structural melting firefight.
It's a profoundly jarring image to even picture. You're looking at the ultimate domestic safety of a 1980s suburb, but it's completely surrounded by the cosmic, the hostile, and the impossible.
Yeah, cognitive vertigo, basically.
Exactly. The contrast alone is enough to induce the sort of, cognitive vertigo.
It's like reading a perfectly normal history book about arcade games and RC Cola, and suddenly the page is alive and it's bleeding right into a 24th century sci-fi epic. So welcome to the deep dive.
Happy to be here to unpack this one.
Today, we're looking at a massive stack of sources. We've got Starfleet after-action reports, psychological evaluations, temporal logs, and even some raw data from artificial intelligence.
And we are using all of that to untangle exactly how this bizarre, almost apocalyptic temporal crisis was solved by the crew of the USS Arawyn.
Right, and the core of this entire event revolves around a really counterintuitive truth. Because they didn't solve this crisis with phasers or photon torpedoes or, tactical brilliance.
No, not at all.
They solved it through extreme, almost agonizing restraint.
Which really is the analytical anchor for everything we're going to discuss today. I mean, if we look at the broader picture of crisis management, human instinct is biologically wired toward action.
100%. Fight or flight.
Right. When confronted with a threat, we want to assert control. We want to shoot, to run, to fix it. But the temporal logs from the Arawyn force us to ask a very difficult question.
What's that?
What happens when the most powerful action you can take in a crisis is choosing to do absolutely nothing?
By the end of this deep dive, you are going to understand exactly why the discipline of doing nothing saved 11,800 human lives. But before we can unpack how the crew of the Arawyn fixed this shattered reality, we have to look at the temporal logs to understand the architecture of the anomaly itself.
Because it wasn't what it looked like.
No, those Klingon and Romulan warships were not attacking Sherman Oaks. They were dragged there. And it fundamentally reframes the threat when you realize from the reports that the entity responsible for this, a being capable of folding space and time, wasn't an invading warlord.
No, it was a juvenile, an adolescent named Aster.
Aster, right.
Yeah, the reports identify Aster as a juvenile stage 4 of a highly advanced species called the Meridian. And honestly, understanding his developmental stage is critical to understanding the mechanics of the disaster.
Because it wasn't malicious, right?
Exactly. This was not a malicious attack or some calculated siege. Aster was running what his species refers to as a learning frame.
Like a field trip.
Kind of like a highly complex, localized field assignment. His objective was simply to observe the emotional patterns of a contained, non-warp human population without interfering.
Right, and he chose an early evening in Sherman Oaks because the emotional state of a neighborhood winding down for the night is usually very stable. People are coming home from work, having dinner.
It's predictable data for him to study.
But then an anomaly occurred that wasn't in his parameters. A minor earthquake knocked out the local power grid. Just a standard blackout.
And that blackout is the inflection point for the entire crisis. Because of the power loss, people actually came outside. The kids were playing in the streets, adults were gathering in lawn chairs, opening coolers before the food could spoil.
They were actually socializing.
Right. And Aster overheard the humans expressing deep appreciation for the beautiful evening. Someone remarked that they wouldn't mind if the sun just stayed exactly where it was.
And because Aster possesses the capability to actually manipulate reality, he decides to be helpful.
Which is tragic in a way.
It really is. Wanting to reduce their underlying distress over the blackout and maintain this positive emotional spike, he simply stopped the sun. He artificially froze the sunset in a state of permanent golden hour.
Which introduces the fatal flaw in his learning frame.
Yeah.
The moment he intervened, he fundamentally altered the system he was supposed to be passively observing.
Yep. He broke the prime directive of his own assignment.
Exactly. He thought he was manipulating a single variable, just the position of the sun, to maximize human happiness. But human psychology is inextricably linked to the passage of time.
Right. I mean, a frozen sunset sounds beautiful for about 10 minutes. But when your shadow doesn't move for 3 hours and the radio broadcast keeps looping the exact same Van Halen song and the exact same DJ banter, you realize the universe is broken.
And that is when the panic sets in.
Yeah. And looking at the after-action reports, it wasn't actually the humans' panic that tore the sky open. It was Aster's reaction to their panic.
Right, because he's just a kid.
Exactly. To use an analogy, it's like running a high-end physics simulation on a computer that's overheating. Like you are playing SimCity, and you try to input a cheat code to make the digital citizens happy, but the processor can't handle the conflicting data.
And it just crashes.
Worse than crashing. Suddenly you're spawning glitching textures, UFO invasions, and a Godzilla attack all at the same time.
That analogy actually maps quite closely to the dimensional physics at play here, believe it or not.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The after-action reports detail that Meridian biology, specifically their nervous system, is directly linked to subspace. They don't use technology to warp reality. Their cognitive state is the technology.
Oh, wow. So his brain is the computer.
Exactly. So when the humans began to panic, Aster realized he was failing his observation assignment. He experienced severe emotional distress. And because his mind is the engine maintaining the simulation, his panic manifested as localized subspace fracturing.
So he literally lost his grip on reality.
Yes. His cognitive load exceeded his control capacity, creating what the reports call probabilistic bleeding.
And that probabilistic bleeding is what opened those windows to other realities and timelines. That is how the Veylith, these massive spacefaring pale creatures, slipped into the atmosphere.
Right.
It's how the ancient Klingon D7 and Romulan bird of prey warships were dragged out of some historical century and dropped right over a suburban driveway, with their weapon systems fully engaged.
Furthermore, Aster's loss of control was so severe that the simulation began aggressively pulling in localized variables just to stabilize itself.
Oh, this is the part about the crew.
Right. This resulted in 2 of the USS Arawyn's own officers, Chief Engineer Ryan Collingway and Chief Science Officer Steve Remington, being ripped from their reality and trapped inside the false 1984 existence.
Aster was frantically trying to plug holes in a sinking ship, and he used the minds of Starfleet officers to do it.
That's a great way to put it.
Which brings us to the response from the USS Arawyn. You have Aster panicking, the sky tearing open, Klingon disruptors firing over cul-de-sacs, and 11,000 people screaming.
It is absolute chaos.
Complete chaos. So Captain Sabrina Corbin and Commander Susanna Battenberg assess the situation, and they issue an order that fundamentally defines this incident. They mandate absolute neutrality.
Which is so hard to do.
Yeah, the logs state they maintained a complete lockdown on offensive capabilities, which feels deeply counterintuitive.
It really does. Battenberg radios the ship from the surface, and Corbin enforces the lockdown on the bridge with terrifying discipline. No weapons, no transporters, no sudden energy spikes of any kind.
But logically, I have to push back on this just a bit.
Go ahead.
If you are Tactical Officer Commander McKinney sitting on the bridge, and you have a graviton net currently holding 2 ancient warships that are actively trying to vaporize each other, why not just warp them out of the atmosphere?
That's a fair question.
I mean, why does doing absolutely nothing work better than a surgical removal? The Arawyn is a sovereign-class ship. It has the technology to isolate and remove those threats.
That is the exact instinct we discussed earlier, the desire to assert control. But we have to look at the thermodynamics of Aster's reality warping.
Okay, lay it on me.
The simulation is an incredibly fragile temporal membrane, and it's being held together by the mind of a terrified adolescent. Any localized energy spike, whether it is a transporter beam, a warp field, or a surgical tractor beam, acts as an external stressor on that membrane.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, Aster's panic is entirely tied to his perceived loss of control. If a massive starship suddenly appears and starts forcibly stealing his variables, removing ships, beaming up civilians, Aster does not feel rescued. He feels attacked.
So he just freak out even more.
Exactly. He panics more, his cognitive control fractures further, and the simulation likely collapses entirely, which would just erase the 11,000 people inside it.
That makes perfect sense, actually. Defensive energy is still energy, and introducing it just overloads the circuit further.
Precisely.
The engineering department, temporarily led by Ensign Sorensen, must have been sweating bullets. I mean, they have lost contact with their chief engineer and their chief science officer. They're essentially blind and paralyzed by command order, just watching the telemetry of a crumbling reality.
It requires immense psychological control from the entire crew. Captain Corbin's leadership really shines here, precisely because she recognizes that her ship's massive firepower is entirely useless against a child's psychological breakdown.
You can't shoot a panic attack.
Exactly. The true battle could not be fought from orbit with graviton nets. It had to be fought with empathy, on the ground, within the simulation itself.
Which brings us to the away team down in the cul-de-sac. Security Chief Aev Flammia and Commander Battenberg locate Aster right in the middle of the neighborhood. And Aster is completely losing it.
He is having a full meltdown.
Yeah, he knows he's broken the rules of his species. Reality is stuttering around him. Cars are flickering into weird spaceships and back again. The sensory overload is catastrophic.
And here is where Flammia's specific skill set becomes the anchor for the entire timeline.
Because of his training, right?
Yes. Flammia possesses Vulcan-adjacent training in emotional control and biofeedback. In a situation where reality is dictated by emotion, physical intervention is useless.
So he doesn't tackle him or anything.
No, Flammia doesn't grab the boy. He doesn't even raise his voice. Instead, he utilizes his training to project a steady, controlled calm. He acts as an emotional grounding rod.
The logs note that Aster's superior, a Meridian named Leora, is attempting to guide Aster telepathically at this point. But telepathy is kind of abstract.
It's not tangible enough for a panic attack.
Right. It is Flammia, physically sitting right there in the grass, offering a tangible, unbothered presence that actually allows Aster to find his focus. Aster looks at Flammia and asks, "Can you remind me that I am not being chased, that I am choosing to put things back?"
Such a powerful moment.
And Flammia just nods and says, "I can."
That statement, "I am choosing to put things back," is the mechanical lever that saves the day.
How so?
For a Meridian, conscious, unpanicked intent is everything. It acts as a localized gravity, well for probability. By verbally stating his intent, Aster forces his conscious mind to override his autonomic panic response.
Oh, I get it. So the restraint on the ground matches the ship.
Exactly. Flammia's extreme restraint on the ground perfectly mirrored Corbin's extreme restraint in orbit. Together, they provided a stable, non-threatening container that allowed Aster the cognitive space to fix his own mistake.
So Aster centers himself, and he makes the choice to unmake the anomaly. And reading the descriptions of what this actually looked like is fascinating.
It's almost beautiful.
It really is. Because as a listener, you would expect this massive explosion of light or some deafening temporal shockwave as physics reasserts itself. But it wasn't violent at all.
No, it was profoundly quiet. The mechanics of the undo process do not involve destruction, they involve parameter deletion.
Parameter deletion.
Yeah, Aster was simply collapsing the probability waves he had accidentally expanded.
The sources describe those massive Veylith creatures swimming through the atmosphere. They don't fly away or burn up. They just fold into thin lines of light and disappear into seams in space.
And the warships, too.
Right. Up in orbit, the Klingon D7 and the Romulan bird of prey are finally released from the Arawyn's graviton net. They immediately resume their century-old battle and fire their plasma weapons directly at each other.
But the plasma blast never connects.
It just vanishes.
The energy just folds inward, because Aster was deleting the physical laws governing that specific plasma from the local area before the energy could even propagate. The ships just blur, stretch, and vanish without a trace, return to whatever historical timeline they were originally plucked from.
That is wild.
Yeah.
And then we get to the most eerie transition of all. Down on the surface, the glowing amber boundary of the neighborhood brightens. The frozen sunset, which has been stuck in the sky for hours, finally moves a fraction of an inch toward night.
And
then the entire 1984 neighborhood simply folds out of sight.
just gone.
Completely gone. The away team goes from standing in a noisy, chaotic, reality-bending suburban war zone with kids screaming and dogs barking to standing on a dusty red-brown, utterly ordinary alien planet. Absolute deafening silence.
It is the starkest visual representation of the artifice being removed. And right before Aster himself vanishes, returning to his people, he makes a final, quiet admission to his superior.
Yeah, I remember this from the logs.
He whispers, "It had been very interesting."
That quote is so deeply unsettling to me. I mean, he is totally mortified that he broke the rules, but he still categorizes the whole event as interesting.
Well, it provides a profound insight into the Meridian mindset. To the human civilians, this was a localized apocalypse. It was the terrifying breakdown of the laws of physics and the violation of their sanity.
But to him,
To a Meridian child, it was just a messy, fascinating field trip. It highlights a scale of existence where our greatest traumas are, to them, merely interesting data points to be analyzed and corrected.
the physical anomaly collapses, leaving only the silence of that red planet. But the energy of that massive simulation had to be anchored somewhere. The architecture of a fake reality doesn't just run on empty space.
Right, it needs a processor.
Which brings us to the psychological debris left behind, specifically in the minds of the Arawyn's crew.
Exactly. The physical danger concluded, but the psychological ramifications were just beginning, particularly for Lieutenant Collingway and Lieutenant Commander Remington.
It's because they were trapped inside it.
Yes, they physically survived the reset, but their cognitive architecture was fundamentally compromised.
The ship's onboard analytical AI, Ignis, processed the telemetry from the event and provided a clinical term for what Aster did to them. Ignis called it a holding frame.
A holding frame.
Yeah. Aster didn't just drop these two officers into a pre-existing neighborhood. He used their actual identities, their memories, and their cognitive processing power as structural scaffolding to keep the reality stable.
The concept of borrowing cognition is just harrowing. A holding frame means that Aster's simulation essentially hijacked the neural pathways of Collingway and Remington to run its background processes.
Like using their brains as RAM.
Exactly like that. And because their brains were used as load-bearing architecture, they were given dual memories. They retained their real memories of being Starfleet officers in the 25th century, but they also genuinely remembered living in 1984.
Collingway remembered being a stressed-out college student driving a Peugeot. They even went to a pub in the simulation and saw menu items named after their crewmates.
Like Corbin's cod burger, right?
Yes, and Battenberg beer. Because their subconscious minds were actively trying to bleed through the simulation, fighting the imposed narrative. I mean, just think about it. If your memories are the structural scaffolding of a fake world, what happens to your actual brain chemistry when that building is taken down?
It creates a severe neurological entanglement. Synaptic pathways that govern identity and chronological memory are forcibly overlapped.
It sounds like an absolute nightmare to treat.
It is. When they are beamed back to the Arawyn and decontaminated in sickbay, Dr. Amberlin's psychological protocols become the primary focus. Survival is no longer about escaping a physical threat. It is about the grueling clinical process of untangling your own identity.
So they have to figure out what's real and what isn't.
Exactly. Amberlin warns them they will have to actively sort through real memories, imposed memories from the simulation, and even suppressed memories that the holding frame unexpectedly unearthed.
There was an incredibly poignant detail in the after-action reports regarding Collingway that really stuck with me.
The part with his pet.
Yes. After being cleared from sickbay, he returns to his quarters. He is just utterly exhausted. His reality has been fractured and rebuilt twice in a single day. He sits down, and his pet, Spencer, jumps onto his chest, just looking for attention.
It is a vital moment of grounding. When high-level cognitive function is compromised by dual memories, the brain desperately seeks simple, tactile realities.
It's something you can touch and know is real.
Right. The weight of the pet, the familiar routine, these act as anchor points to help reestablish baseline reality. Collingway and Remington survived the Meridian, but the clinical process of choosing which memories belong to them is an ongoing battle.
So we have journeyed from a timeless 1980s sunset and phantom warships to a cosmic child's panic, and ended up on a silent red rock with a crew trying to piece their own neurological pathways back together.
It's quite the journey.
It is an absolute masterclass in crisis management, honestly. Captain Corbin holding the line in orbit, Aev Flammia providing an emotional anchor on the ground. They prove that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is contain your own fear and refuse to add energy to the chaos.
It fundamentally challenges the traditional narrative of heroism. In highly complex, fragile systems, extreme restraint is often far more difficult and far more effective than extreme force.
Which leaves us with one final lingering thread to pull.
There's always one.
Always. We know Aster put things back. The logs confirm the neighborhood was reset. And we know Collingway and Remington remember the ordeal because their cognition was actively borrowed. But what about the 11,800 human civilians from Sherman Oaks?
Well, Aster has stated to his superior that most of them would not remember the event.
Most of them. which implies exceptions,
That
right?
does.
If those civilians were seamlessly returned to their exact Tuesday in 1984, do their nervous systems retain the stress? Like, did Helen, the woman down the street, ever finish her frantic phone call to Martha about the alien ships tearing through the sky?
It is a terrifying proposition. The physical evidence is gone, but the synaptic echoes might remain.
So, the next time you are sitting in your own neighborhood and the sun is going down and the golden hour seems to hang in the sky just a little too long, ask yourself, is it just a trick of the light? Or is there a phantom memory buried deep in your brain, silently bracing for the sky to tear open?